It's the Can-Do Meetup for December. The topic is people pleasing and setting boundaries. That can come in handy at the end of the year when we seem to put a lot of pressure on ourselves to perhaps even overperform, whether it's, for a holiday celebration or we're really going to kick it into high gear to finish out the year in whatever it is we're doing for work or our community. So the first question, we're going to drop it in the tile. You can just put your comment in the chat. Here's the first question. Where in your life do you do the most people pleasing? Is this with family, friends, work, one person? Is this you? You're like everywhere? I'm going to catch my glasses. Oh, we've got one for family, work for sure, and family and friends are a nice close second. See how we can categorize? Ooh, volunteering in community, that really powerful ability to say yes. I'd have to say for me, I should pop mine in the chat too for a tile. I think for me, people pleasing, it might actually be a couple of people in my life that I have a harder time setting a boundary. What about you, Isabella? Where I'm going to say a person or two and drop it in. Where do you do your most people pleasing, Isabella?
I'm gonna echo with Chant, and definitely in the work that I do, and tend to people please a lot there, and it shows up too in other areas, but definitely in work.
In work. Okay. Then here's the other question, the follow-up question. So we set the table for the session today. Do you have the ability to turn this on and off? Or is this just your DNA? Yes, click that one, or you type a one, I guess, don't you, Isabella? Put a one in the chat if you're yes, I can turn it on and off. Two, if it is just you, you are wired this way. Okay.
Seeing some two
Two,
come in.
twos. This is exciting because everybody that's on our session this morning is wired to be a people pleaser through and through. So we're going to get some engaging conversation and some tools about how does this show up. And let's just talk about that now. Let's start with that. How does this show up for you? Like, do you, and go ahead and come off mute if you'd like, do you feel guilty if you don't say yes?
I think I
Do
just
you,
put others' happiness sometimes before my own. And
okay,
I
how do you,
I
and
make it better for them by just taking it on myself.
all right, and you're just like, I know I can make it better. I do it every time, so I'm just going to keep doing that because their life will be better. Okay, good reason. That's how it shows up. What about you, Chance? How does it show up for you?
Mine would kind of be similar to Megan's. In addition to mine, it's also the kind of building my career and trying to, work my way up that ladder, the corporate ladder. So, trying to prove myself and show them what I can do, show my leaders what I can do. So it's kind of that shows up too.
Okay, yep, just trying to do everything you can to propel yourself forward. What about you, Ron?
Well, the one I'm thinking about is my long-term relationship with my spouse. And what it shows up is when I feel frustrated, I feel like arguing. Um, and so I figure, okay, I just need to back off and do what this other person wants me to do, or figure out a way to accommodate it. So to avoid arguments. And again, because it's a long-term relationship, we have this pattern of where and history of it. So that's why it's sort of natural for me to go into that. Okay, how can I keep this relationship on an even keel?
Good. Like, yeah, the training wheels are off for all of us. And Isabella, with your scientific mind, with the professional training that you've had on this neuro-linguistic programming and, the brain function itself, share with us a little bit more. How did we learn this behavior? Where does it come from?
So the thing is, everything that we do is learned, which also means it can be unlearned. A lot of the times when we're kids, when we're growing up, we learn these behaviors. One time at some point in your life, you made a decision that this was going to be a good thing to people please, that there was some benefit to you. Now, as you've gotten older, maybe that benefit has started to fade away, and maybe people pleasing isn't serving you as much. At one point in your life, though, it was. And there was some kind of secondary gain to you people pleasing. There is always a higher reason and a higher purpose for why we do what we do, an objective that we're trying to achieve at the end of the day. And so people pleasing, a lot of the times, what can happen is that whether it's looking for external validation, feeling like you belong to the group, feeling acknowledged, feeling loved, feeling wanted, we seek out these core emotional needs that we have, that fulfillment of these needs through things that sometimes maybe aren't the most healthy for ourselves at the end of the day. And the thing is, there's always going to be push and pull in life. Things vying for your attention, pulling you this way, pushing you that way. There's always going to be trade-offs. There's always going to be sacrifices that you're making. Where it's unhealthy is when you're making those sacrifices and you're not really clear on why exactly maybe you're making those sacrifices, or if you're just doing it to get that validation or to fill that need, and then it's not being met, and you just end up in this unhealthy spiral, scramble, frustration, maybe some resentment, some frustration, some maybe even anxiety of, oh, this is just me, this just happens. So we once, going back to that in childhood, we once learned that this would have some kind of positive externality to it, whether that's being loved, getting that external praise. And we started to build an identity around that. Oh, this is me. I am a people pleaser. And when we look at that identity we've created, everything stems from there. All our behaviors stem from that identity. So a great practical tool here that you can use is when you find yourself people pleasing, and it's a sacrifice you're making, maybe that you don't really necessarily want to be making. When you find yourself in those situations, to stop and ask yourself this question: what else could you be? If not a people pleaser, who else could you be in this moment? Maybe that sounds like, I'm going to be an advocate for my boundaries today. I'm going to be a leader that takes a firm, strong stance today. Who else could you be? Because when you start to challenge that identity that you've been building up for so long, now you're starting to break out of that and think of what else could you be. All behavior stems from the level of identity, of who we see ourselves being. Change the identity to change the behavior, change who you see yourself being, and you will do differently. And it's like a merry-go-round. If you've ever, how many of us have been on a merry-go-round before, right? Whenever you get those like rings and you throw them and you try to make it through the hole on the merry-go-round, and you just go around and around and around and around and around. And you know exactly when the timing is coming up to pull that ring, to throw it, and it becomes automatic. You keep doing it. And that's how our brains work. We learned a long time ago to be people pleasers, what that looks like, what that sounds like, what that feels like. It's become so automatic. We're just going around on that merry-go-round. And a lot of the time, we don't know when it's time to get off. And we just keep going around and throwing that ring. And we don't know why we're doing what we're doing, but we just keep doing it. And it becomes exhausting trying to break out of that sometimes. And the way to break out of that is to get on a different merry-go-round, which is to change the identity. Who else are you if not a people pleaser? Denise, I can see you wanted to say
Oh
more.
yeah, I want to jump in, and our listeners and participants do too. One thing I noticed that you said twice was in changing that belief or that identity for yourself. you said today, I'm going to advocate for myself, or I'm going to set better boundaries, or today I'm going to, you didn't really say effective immediately, and henceforth forever and into the future, I shall declare I am no longer this. It seems like, I mean, say more, but it seems like for the change, did you guys hear that too? It seems like for the change, it's like we don't have to declare perfection from here going forward, but maybe that's the way we do change just today. And in my case, if it's one person, just this one interaction, I'm going to reprogram who I am in that relationship and how I'm going to show up differently. Did you guys hear that too on the change?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Denise. It's just one decision at a time, one decision at a time. And that's how you create a new identity, a new pattern, one decision at a time. That's how you learn to become a people pleaser in the first place, was repetitive decisions repeated over time that eventually created a program that's running in your mind now, that is what you know how to do. So then I want you, the next time you find yourself going to people please or saying yes maybe to something you don't really want to say yes to, what I want you to do is this. I want you to look at the feeling first around the people pleasing. What is that emotion? Maybe it's frustration for you, maybe it's anger, maybe it's feeling powerlessness, whatever that emotion is that's coming up for you. I want you to first look at that. Then what I want you to do is I want you to notice the thoughts just before you said yes to that person. Then I want you to notice your thoughts during doing that, saying yes or doing whatever it is that you didn't really want to do. And then I want you to notice your thoughts at the back end, right after you've done it. And a helpful exercise might even be to actually write these down. You could do that in your notes app. You could do that on a journal. Because what you're going to notice is you're going to start to notice some patterns. When do you tend to people please the most? And you're going to start to notice, my prediction is that you're going to notice those thoughts tend to be the same thoughts every time you go to people please. And I want you to listen for those core thoughts. A lot of the times it's from a place of, like I said, from that childhood, that's how you've learned to get that validation, or that's how you've learned to seek that love, that sense of belonging, that at the end of the day, at the highest level that we all want as human beings. When you start to notice what are those thoughts that are really driving that behavior, that's when you can start to change your thoughts and change what you ultimately end up doing. So the first step to breaking out is awareness, which just by being here today, by listening to this, by being here, by participating in this call today, this meetup today, you are already starting to break that cycle, because now you can't unhear everything that you're hearing today, because the next time you go to people please, you will remember back to this moment. You are planting a seed right now in your brain to start doing things differently. This is a pattern interrupt to your normal pattern of how you have been doing things up until this point in time. And going forward, like Denise said, today, you can make a new decision. You no longer have to make the decisions that you've been making for 5, 10, 20, 30, however many years. Today, you can make a new decision about who you're going to be going forward, and pick that word for you, that level of identity. If you're not a people pleaser, who else?
Who are you? Maybe you serve others with boundaries. I could do that. I love people. So I could serve them with some boundaries. What are some other definitions you might come up with? Instead of announcing yourself, and you probably don't do this when you enter the room. Hello, I'm a people pleaser. You know, who needs a volunteer? I'm a sucker. I mean, that is not the way you're going to introduce yourself, but that might be what's programmed in your mind, that you think they know that I'm a good volunteer. They're going to ask me, and I know I can save them. So how would you reprogram if you did identify as a people pleaser? How would you re-identify? What's a definition you could give yourself?
And I want to say too, this all happens unconsciously. And 95% of what we do is unconscious, to the point where we don't even realize why we're doing what we're doing. So that's truly why awareness is the first step. So you can notice your patterns. When do you typically find yourself saying yes? Are there certain contexts? Are there certain people? Noticing those patterns, noticing those beliefs. And Denise, I know you have a really great tool on how to say no when you're finding it may be difficult to say no to someone. You want to tell us about your yes and tool?
Yes, and it works in improv and it works here. So oftentimes we don't really want to say no. And we picture in our mind that the choices are yes and no. But what if the choice was yes and? Yes, I could volunteer for the event next week, but I wouldn't be able to produce any content until the night before. If that's helpful, I could do that, but I'm not able to do that until that night before. Oh, well, we're going to need that in the next 20 minutes. Oh, that's nothing I could deliver. So try that as far as a ground level tool. Yes, and go ahead and build right in there what your boundary is. Yes, but with this parameter. And then they can take it or leave it. Wouldn't that be easy? Yes. Yes, and you'll build that muscle too without just saying yes or no. You'll start to reprogram, and try this with people that you don't know first. Maybe that's a safe place. Try it with the people at Walgreens and the people at the grocery store and the people that are on the phone. Start to build that habit of saying, yes, and it's a wonderful day. Yes, and just start to build that repetition, because like Isabella said, everything we do is learned and can be unlearned. So yes, and is a big tool, ground level, that you could start using right now to help you with people pleasing.
Yes. So good. And building off of that too, when you start to think in that terms of that yes and what
And
else, you're looking outside of original, because what tends to happen is we tend to have a narrow tunnel vision of this is how I do it, this is how I do it, this is how I do it. By adding that yes and, you are forcing yourself now to look outside of that tunnel, and now you can start to see new solutions that you might not have seen before, that have always been there. You just haven't been able to see them before. And in part of that, expanding that perception to what can help you break out of those patterns is to look at who else might be able to help you to do that. So what we like to say is like forming can-duets, forming those partnerships with other people around you, collaborations, who could help you to break out of those patterns. Or when someone asks you to do something and you don't really want to do it, who around you could you bring into that conversation to help with that? Maybe someone asks you to bake the holiday cookies. You hate baking the holiday cookies. You do not want to do it. But you happen to know that your friend Susan down the street, she loves baking. She has the time for it. She absolutely loves it. It's her gift. How could you tap her? How could you bring in her talent? That takes it off of your plate. So looking for ways to delegate. When you find people coming to you, and maybe they're coming to you with problems that they have, it's all about how can you empower the people around you and tap into their gifts, because it doesn't all have to fall on you. You don't have to have all the answers yourself. You don't have to do everything yourself, but thinking in terms of more of a team player. Who do you know that you can bring in to share in this work? Who would maybe even have a great sense of joy going through it? And it's to know what brings you joy. What are your values? Because when you do the yes and, you've got to know your boundaries ahead of time. You've got to know what you value ahead of time, not when you get to that moment where you got to make that decision. So it might be worth just taking 5-10 minutes today, tomorrow, to write out your top values. What are your non-negotiables? Because there's always going to be push and shove in life. We're always being pulled, but you got to know what you're not willing to compromise for. What are your top non-negotiables? non-negotiables? What brings you joy? And with that, Denise, you want to share?
Yeah, not necessarily, well, I guess it's on the joy level, not necessarily an emotional level, although they can be related, but you could drop this in the chat too. There's a free tool on the website, clever with dashes, can-do-ology.com, the toolkit. There's a joy meter in there, and there's a fillable one too. You can either just download the paper old-fashioned tool, or there's a interaction, but it's helping us think through what Isabella's talking about. Does this bring me joy? And like she had said earlier, how am I feeling before? That's the cool thing about this tool, is it's measuring on multi-level, not saying, do I like doing events or, planning events? It measures, how do you feel coming up to the event? Excited, you're creative, you're brainstorming, you're figuring out all the things that could be done. How are you feeling in the moment of the event? Drained. There's too many people around and it's way too stressful. And then after, you're completely drained. Well, you're going to score that, and you're going to find out maybe that's something that doesn't score high enough for you, that you really value, for you to keep saying yes. Here's the case study for me. I had gone through the joy meter. That's why I built it. The universe had delivered me some really great opportunities to figure out, am I at my best when I'm leading a keynote, a workshop, strategic planning, facilitation? I don't know. And some of these I'm very good at. But what happened to me is I went through and scored myself. And for me, strategic planning came up, that I was very good at it because I love the live group and how we can all learn together. And then afterward, it was kind of, did I enjoy getting ready for it? Not one little bit. No, I didn't like doing all the research and getting ready. And what that did for me, within like a year, I had someone come to me and say, would you facilitate my planning session? And it came so fast. No. I think I just did a downright no. I don't think I did a yes and. I said, no, no. And he said, well, how about a big staff day and do something with my staff? I said, you're on. What did you have in mind? And I was so delighted that I was so clear. So going back to what Isabella says, who do you believe you are? How have you been trained? If you're a people pleaser, use the tools, the yes and, or at some point a downright no is going to come out and say, no, I'm good at that, but there's some other things that I'm even better at, or that bring me even greater joy. And if I have joy, guess what? You're going to have more joy, because we're all kind of like in flow. So that's called the joy meter. Isabella, you'd pop that in there for us in the chat. Thank you. Thank you.
I did, Denise. And also too, I think it's worth, I want you to share the question that you always ask that will help you to know, are you saying no? Are you saying yes? What is that question?
This comes from, of course, your handbook, the Can-Do Mindset, page 15. Here's the question. Remember City Slicker, where the guy was like, hey, it boils down to one simple question? I had boiled it down to, and actually this is funny because Isabella reminded me of this, that it's in the book, but you ask yourself this question: why did I do that? Why do I want to do that? Why did I say that? Why am I thinking of saying that? If the answer is, I really want to, you're likely on the right path. If you put anything else in there and say, because I thought, insert anything, you're likely falling a little more victim to some people pleasing. So why did I do that? Why do I want to do that? Did we give you a lot in 30 minutes? We have moments to wrap this thing up, didn't we? Wait till you see what we're going to do in January. While everybody else is talking about goal setting, we got a couple slides for you, Isabella, I think, to pop in here. Here's how you can stay in touch. Can-Do on deck. We are developing what we're calling the Leadership Lab. It'll be available in January, and you will be first to know about it. It's basically modular learning that goes very in depth, but starts at the top on the way that we're wired, how our mind works. Then we get to the behaviors. So the modules are 3 modules built around me or you, really understanding who you are, how you're wired, how you show up, what you want for yourself. The next 3 modules, and they're all virtual, the next 3 modules are focused on you or you, those around us. How do we interact with others? How do they show up? How are we showing up? How do we bridge some generational divide in our lives? And then finally, how do we pull it all together for the team and the organization or the community? Me, you, we, it'll be available in January and you will be the first to know, but we're excited to build the materials. We are running like moments late, Isabella. Do you want to put a cherry on top for that at all?
Yeah, and it's all going to be experience-based, model-based learning, because we learn best by doing. That's how we start to reprogram our behaviors and learn new ways of developing leadership confidence, leadership excellence, and leadership competencies is learning by doing. So it will all be experimental learning in a safe environment and trying out doing behaviors that you might not want to test out in front of your boss or with your team. And it gives you that space to practice, to learn by doing, to get that real-time feedback, and to become even more confident and effective and influential as a leader. And with that,
the Can-Do Meetup for January is January 6th, same time, same bat channel. She'll pop it in there for us to register. We want you to register for January. We're going to talk about failing forward fast. We're likely to misstep. We're humans. And so if we set some big goals for ourselves in January, we're likely to fail forward. So how do we do that? How do we learn quickly? In February, that's February 3rd, that's the first Monday in February, we're going to be talking about how do you love yourself first? How do you love yourself more? While everybody's focused on couples and Valentines, we're going to focus on self and self-love. So thank you for being here. It's the second Can-Do Meetup, and we're headed for the third in about 30-ish days. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you